Good evening, and thank you for dropping into What Do You Think? My name is Bill Morse, and this program is a call-in program whereby I put out there a question each week, every Thursday at 6 p.m., and I rely on you, the viewers, to call in with your particular answer. These are often open-ended questions. In other words, there is no correct answer. Your answer is the one that we want to hear. So before, just to give you what's the word? Just to let you know what the question is going to be today or this evening, it is the following. If you, in hindsight, if you had to rethink or change a decision that you made sometime in your life, what would it be and why? In other words, have you ever regretted a decision that you made in your life, a decision that, had it been otherwise, may have changed your life or that of other people? It doesn't need to be a very personal answer. I know for myself, if someone posed me that question, what would you change given what you know now as far as a decision that you made? There are personal answers, and then there are more public answers. And so if you're interested in sharing a more public answer, then by all means, please call in the Zoom number down at the bottom of your screen. And once you call into the Zoom number, you will be prompted for a meeting code, and that is followed by a passcode. So please be patient with the numbers. There's a lot of them, but that's how we're able to make a call-in program possible. But before we get to your answers to that question, I just wanted to report on the passing of a person who doesn't really get much press or media attention here in this country. Very often when we hear of news from Africa, it's news of the continent and rarely news from any one of the many countries that comprise that continent. And this bit of news comes from Tanzania, which is a rather large country in Southeast Africa. And they have about 60 million people. They have a democracy, and Tanzania has probably been one of the strongest democracies in the last 30, 40 years of African history. And the gentleman in question is the president of Tanzania, Mr. John Magufuli. I had to look at his name because I didn't trust myself to get it right. Magufuli. His name is John Magufuli. He was the president of Tanzania, and his administration made it known that he passed away yesterday, Wednesday, March 17th, in a hospital in the capital of Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and that he died from heart conditions. Now, why is John Magufuli so important? Well, as you know, the state of Vermont is in a state of emergency. We will be in this state of emergency for another month. It lapsed on March 15th, and then our governor, Phil Scott, decided to renew the state of emergency until April 15th. Tanzania has also had issues with COVID, though not quite as severe as some of the other more populated states in our United States. I believe in the last year or so they've had perhaps 60 fatalities that have been directly linked with COVID. 60 out of a population of 60 million, and perhaps 500 infections that were diagnosed. Now, a year ago, when COVID started making its rounds from country to country and people became aware of the threat and the situation that they faced, the government of Tanzania government of John Magufuli, say that 5 times, Magufuli, decided that it would not accept money or vaccines from the World Health Organization. It would not accept vaccines from the Bill Gates Foundation. The president decided that his people would choose the path of home remedies, of trying to strengthen their immune system and depend less on chemicals being introduced into the body. He was harshly criticized. His government was offered millions of dollars if they would accept this aid. In other words, there was this financial incentive from the World Health Organization as well as the Bill Gates Foundation. He said no. Later he found out, or he claimed, that through testing, the vaccine that he was being offered had a propensity for sterilizing female injectees. In other words, there was a serious allegation that this vaccine induced sterilization in women. And he saw this as an attempt to population control through the back door of various African nations, his, of course, being one that refused this vaccine. So anyway, a remarkable man, one that chose a different path from other governments. And I'm not going to say if he was correct in rejecting the vaccine or correct in rejecting World Health Organization grants or monies for tracking and caring for COVID patients, but he did pass away this past Wednesday, or that's when the announcement came out. So I just want to mention his name, John Magufuli. I'm sorry, Mr. Magufuli. And anyone who is familiar with him and knows how to say his name without babbling. So anyway, he passed away, and as other people come to light that stand out from the crowd and actually act on what they believe are for the betterment of their country, I'm going to just give a brief announcement at the beginning of the show. So anyway, your prayers for the people of Tanzania, for the Vice President. I do not know her name, but she will be taking the reins, and it'll be interesting to see if she keeps the course of going it without vaccines, and see if indeed the mortality rate increases from the 29 deaths out of 60 million that the country has experienced. So anyway, let's get back to our question. If you had a decision to change or to rethink over, what would it be and why? So I think we do have a caller on the line. Yes, we do. So thank you for calling in, dropping by, and would you like to share with us a decision that you've made and that you have since rethought and reconsidered?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Mr. Morris. After some consideration, actually it's kind of a two-part thing, but by trade I'm an electrical engineer, and have been doing that since the late 70s. And really, in hindsight, I actually question, being in engineering, typically you end up doing something in the manufacturing trade. And later in my career, I also got involved in being self-employed. And I have to say that sometimes I've questioned my choice of doing that. If I knew what I knew now, versus what I knew then, I may have tried something else. Unfortunately, anyone that's certainly aware of manufacturing today, our business has been so affected by Chinese manufacture and overseas manufacture. And it's unfortunate in this country, we've found that it's almost impossible now to compete against Chinese labor rates and their material costs. And it's very, very difficult to compete. And even though my particular market, which is in lighting manufacturing, we're finding that the Chinese are having such a great ability to introduce themselves into our marketplace, where we used to sell to large people like Home Depot or Walmart. That's almost exclusively now being manufactured in China, and basically that's my main issue. Is it's just so difficult for a typical American company. If you're in a business that's fairly large that will attract Chinese interest, you're going to find that you're going to have a hard time existing. And currently, we're running at almost half staff because of what's going on between that and COVID. So that's basically my intro.
That's
I don't know what else you want.
no,
Comments?
that's a very timely, appropriate introduction. Out of curiosity, if you offered your product at a cost of, let's say, $1 per unit, what do you think generally would be the Chinese counteroffer? Now, I'm going to say this, and perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong. You are a private enterprise. You're a lighting company, whereby the Chinese competitor is heavily subsidized by the Chinese government through the Chinese Communist Party. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I can give you a couple of examples. When I decided to become self-employed, my partner and I decided to get involved in emergency lighting products. At the time, an emergency exit sign that you might see over a doorway in a restaurant typically would cost somewhere in the order of about $100 for someone to buy, and would cost at that time about $50 for us to manufacture. Basically now there are companies in China that will sell an exit sign to you if you wish to decide to sell it in the marketplace yourself. They'll sell you a completed sign for $10 and they'll put your name on it. I can't even make stuff that cheap. And that's the dilemma that I'm faced with now. That ultimately actually drove us out of emergency lighting. That market is virtually owned now by Chinese importers. We had diversified into commercial lighting for industrial space and for retail spaces and so forth. And when we got involved in that, all of our products, our steel and everything was all American made. The products that actually operated the lighting fixtures, such as ballasts and what are known now as LED drivers, originally were made in the United States, typically in Illinois and in a few other places. You can now no longer buy a domestically made driver. They are all outsourced, typically to China, to some degree from Mexico. But the thing is it's just remarkable how cheap the products. They're functional and everything, but the thing is it's almost impossible to find an American vendor still. And unfortunately, to remain in business, we've had to actually outsource sheet metal, LEDs, drivers. The majority of our components have to come from China to be able to even still assemble them in the United States. And that really, really frustrates me. And that's really why, if I knew 40 years ago what was going to happen, I probably would have had my career go in another direction. Go ahead, Bill.
Sure. May I use your name?
Sure.
Okay, Kurt. Very good points. The fact that it costs you $50 to produce something, and a company that's subsidized by the government and China through the Communist Party can do it for $10 makes me think about, first of all, their wages, what type of environmental conditions they operate under as far as waste disposal, whatever toxins go into the atmosphere. And I don't think this, you bring up an excellent point, it doesn't really get discussed enough. My pet peeve is going into the local hardware store. I try to go into the local hardware store here on the square in Bellows Falls because Vermont, one plus that Vermont does have, and a tip of the hat to those responsible, is that we do not have very many big box stores. We still have small mom and pop, privately, family owned businesses that employ anywhere from 10 to 50 people, let's say. That said, I still go to these small hardware stores, but the choice is very similar. Whether I go to a Home Depot in Keene or Claremont, which are the closest ones, or if I go to the hardware store here on the square, the nails that I have to buy are made in China. I use a 22 or 20 ounce hammer, framing hammer, to drive these nails into pine or sometimes a harder wood. The finishing nails have a tendency to bend on me. Perhaps other people have had that experience. If anyone has bought screws or bolts in the last 10 years or so, many of those are made in China. And the heads strip. Why do the heads on the screws strip? Why do the nails bend? Because the alloys, the metal alloys that are used, are of a cheaper variety, again to bring the lower price. And they're run in stamping mills. I don't think that technology has changed much. And you have to ask, how much are the operators of these stamping mills being paid? I don't know how much it costs to make a living in China. Perhaps it's a very low cost of living, thereby you have low wages. I'm not sure. This is something that our media does not report on, at least
Well,
my
I can tell you
opinion.
out of my experience that a fully labored person in China in our particular type of manufacturing for our components typically makes about $2 an hour.
Okay, $2
And of
an
course,
hour.
yeah.
Okay, well, thereby,
So
and I'm
compare
sure
that
they,
to American wage.
yes, $2, yeah, exactly. So it's impossible to compete, and thereby we are flooded with products made overseas in a very heavily subsidized system. That said, we also subsidize agriculture in this country and subsidize other industries. But there's got to be a middle ground. I don't think there is right now, whereby American manufacturers, the ones that still exist and employ people and produce a good product, have a chance of competing. And I was hopeful when the last couple of years some trade agreements were revisited and renegotiated. Hopefully there was more fair or more leeway or more conditions put on what products could be sold in this country, as far as living wage, as far as environmental protection, and as far as quality of materials. So so that's your decision would have been to work for someone else or go into another field that would have not been so sensitive or vulnerable to competition from heavily subsidized foreign source. Is that right, Kurt?
Exactly that. Yes. I mean, I grew up in a time, I remember when, even automobiles and so forth were starting to be outsourced overseas in other countries. And there was a slogan, be American, buy American. One, you don't hear that slogan anymore. And two, there's no possibility to be able to buy American in so many products. Find an American-made TV. I mean, it really, that's what actually was the gears that got this country going. And I just don't know how it's sustainable without manufacturing. And it's unfortunate to see so many manufacturing jobs leave the country. And
That's
it's
true.
unfortunate. My hands are tied behind my back, and I don't have any opportunity really myself to turn things around. It's really got to be done on a grassroots level. But somehow that be American, buy American has to somehow come back. I mean, it's a global economy, but we're not working on an even playing field. It's very unfortunate.
That's true. I just heard the announcement today from the United Auto Workers that Ford Motor Company is moving a $900 million operation, car manufacturing, from Ohio to Mexico. So there will be a lot of jobs lost in Ohio once that move goes through. It may not go through. Depends on this current administration. I'm not holding my breath, but this at least needs to be discussed instead of it happens and then boom, the jobs are gone. You have another town that's on the ropes economically, and more people whose livelihood has been destroyed. We're still recovering from the deindustrialization of our country. Welfare and drugs are not the answer. And I really think that making something with your hands is very therapeutic. We make something, we're proud of it, we use it. That's part of that's part of being the citizen of any country. And there's got to be a way where each person has a role in their own country in contributing and making something. So we will continue this. Kurt, I want to thank you for your comments. That was a good discussion.
Well, thank you very much for your time as well. Thanks so much.
All right, we'll talk with you another time.
Okie doke.
Okay.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We will continue this discussion next week. Again, if there's a decision in your life that you now regret, that you would like a chance to redo, in hindsight, given what you know today, what is that decision? We are running out of time, so I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you for tuning in. And again, we will see each other next Thursday at 6 p.m. Cheers.